Well, Dana, welcome back.
Yes, Don.
We're back in action. It's February upon us, and the Film Detective has a big schedule of movies and TV shows to talk about. In recognition of Black History Month, we're going to be showing quite a few movies with Black casts, Black musicians. We have movies with Duke Ellington. Called The Duke is Tops. We have a great one called Killer Diller. And that's my pick of the month, Killer Diller. It stars Nat King Cole, Moms Mabley, and Butterfly McQueen. Butterfly McQueen, the Oscar winner.
Wow. That's
no, she wasn't the Oscar winner. Somebody else won an Oscar for Gone with the Wind.
I don't think it was Butterfly McQueen. No,
it was someone else in that cast. But Butterfly was the maid with the high squeaky voice.
Yes.
Yeah, but Moms Mabley, Butterfly McQueen, and Nat King Cole in a movie called Killer Diller. That's my pick for the month, and it airs a couple of times. And speaking of great Black performers, we just lost Sidney Poitier a few weeks ago.
Yeah, terrible. He was such a nice man. I had the pleasure of meeting him.
Oh, good.
Once, regrettably not for his best movie that he was promoting, but nevertheless, he was just a wonderful guy. I mean, he was gentle, honest, and had a wonderful sense of humor. The funny thing about him, it's interesting that because you're doing Black History Month, of course, that he'll best be remembered probably for breakthrough roles and for bringing civil rights to Hollywood, which was should have happened a long time before he arrived. But he was a man that really, despite the fact that he may have been impoverished at times, wouldn't take roles that were not dignified or certainly put Black actors in that were not good to Black actors, that didn't be respectful of the Black community. And he did that on a couple of occasions. In fact, once when he was having a baby, in fact, and he had just come off the road. He was doing this, he was actually, I think, understudy on the road for this play that he found himself in. And he wasn't making a lot of money to begin with. But then he did get himself an agent. And as he came off this, he didn't have any money. His wife was about to have this baby. He needed $75 to pay the hospital, is what he needed. And his agent calls him and says, I think we have a movie for you. Now, the movie turned out to be this kind of detective and crime drama. And in it, he would have played a janitor. And he had no problem with doing that whatsoever. But at one point, apparently in this script, when he read the script, he said he hated it. At one point in this script, when he was reading it, the janitor has a daughter and he witnesses a murder. And in order to intimidate him, the criminals take the daughter and they kill the daughter and they dump her on the front lawn. And that intimidates the janitor into not saying anything about the murder that these criminals have committed. Well, he took one look at it and he said, nobody would ever do that. I certainly wouldn't do that. And he was raised in the Bahamas by his father till he was 15 years old and he left. But he said, my father certainly would never taught me that. He was a man that would have taken revenge or would have made sure that it never happened. So he said, I'm not going to take that role whatsoever. Now, keep in mind, he said, I was broke at the time, broke. And they were offering him $750. $750 to do this role.
And that would go a long way.
In those days, it would go in the 50s, it would go a long way. And he owed, don't forget, he owed the hospital $75. But instead, he said no, turned down the role. And then he literally financed his furniture for $75 to pay the hospital. Because that's the kind of guy that he was. Extraordinary that, he's got to be remembered, of course, as this breakthrough actor, but he has an extraordinary story. that he even succeeded as an actor, as opposed to becoming an international star as one of the best actors in the 20th century and on into the 21st century. In fact, um, he started out in Miami as a delivery boy when he was about 15 years old. He had got from the Bahamas into Miami, so he was in his early teenage years. He hated the South, he hated Florida, and he said it was because he hated Florida because it was unfair. And he suffered some discrimination while he was in Florida as a delivery boy. People telling him, get around back, you're not supposed to be in the front. And he actually tells a horrible story about how he went to this woman's house one time. He was working for a department store as a delivery boy. He had a bicycle, and so he goes to this big house, and he goes up to the front door, and he either knocks on the door, he rings the doorbell, and this woman opens the door, and she's irate and says, go around back. And so he said, I was stunned. I didn't really know why I was supposed to go around back. He said, it didn't seem right to me. She's 3 feet in front of me. I have a package in my hand, and I think she should have taken the package. So she slammed the door on my face, and I put the package down in front of the front door. I just put it down on the ledge in the front door, and then I left. He said that day he went to the movies because he got a few pennies together to go to the movies. He was staying with his brother at the time, who had stowed away in a motorboat, in fact, to get to Florida. But anyway, he's staying in his brother's house with his brother's family, his wife and their children. And when he came home that day, and when he walked home, suddenly all the lights were out in the house, and that was very unusual. And so he went up to the house, and the door was locked. And he knocked on the door, and eventually his brother's wife came to the door, opened the door, and threw him in the side, grabbed him, threw him inside. And the children and she were on the floor, and she pulled him down to the floor, and she said, the KKK were here, the Ku Klux Klan were here. So as a result of him going to the front door of that house, somehow, somebody told the Ku Klux Klan, and they actually showed up to intimidate that family. That's an extraordinary story when you think about it. And that was like in the 1950s down in Miami, Florida, somewhere around Miami, Florida, in Miami, Florida. So anyway, he never forgot that, but he was never a guy that was that bitter about anything. He was he gave a lot of money to the civil rights movement. He traveled with Martin Luther King for a while. But he never, in fact, during the 1960s, during the riots in the late 60s, that those of us who are old enough to remember will certainly remember, the press, every time that he was available doing a movie, the first thing the press would ask him about is the civil rights movement, ask him about what he felt about it. And there's this wonderful moment that he turns on the press and says, stop, I'm a man, I'm an artist, I'm a father, I'm a husband. I mean, there's a lot of facets to me. Stop asking me questions about being, a representative of the Black community. There's a lot of facets. I've told you everything I want to tell you about that. So he got angry at one point about that, which was really uncharacteristic of him. And but it's amazing that when he was in New York, he made his way up to New York, again, because he felt the South was unfair. When he came up to New York, he was a dishwasher. That's what he was. And he said, all right, now I'm in my teens, but I can't read. He literally could not read. And he was saying, I've got to learn how to read a lot better because there are streets in New York I need to find my way around that have more than 2 syllables. He literally had trouble reading words that had, it's hard to imagine that Sidney Poitier ever had trouble reading. But he said, I couldn't read anything. I mean, he left school when he was 12 years old in the Bahamas. So he literally read on a 3rd grade level. So one day he's walking down the street and he's looking for a job. He's in between dishwashing jobs, porter jobs, or the jobs that he used to take. And he's got a newspaper, and the newspaper was an African-American newspaper. And in it, there used to be a lot of ads in it for wanted dishwasher, wanted porter, wanted delivery man. the jobs that he was taking at the time. And he said there weren't any jobs. It wasn't for dishwashers or porters, whatever. So he said, I literally wrapped up the newspaper and I went to throw it in the bin, throw it in a trash can, an open trash can. And as I threw it in, I saw this little blurb that said wanted actors. So he picked it back out of there and he said, okay, wanted actors. And he wound up, it was only a few blocks from where he actually was. And he said, and don't remember that every ad that he saw was wanted this, wanted that, said wanted actors. He said, okay. So he went into this small actor studio, which is in the basement apparently of a library or a church. And he walked in and said, I'm here to audition. Now he said he had a Bahamian accent. He used to love to tell this story because he found great amusement in the story that he actually showed up to do something like this. But he walks into the basement and he was greeted by, he said, this very large man. And he said to him, what are you doing here? He said, I'm here to audition. And he said, okay. So he gave him a script to read, a couple of lines from the script to read. And he said, okay, you and I will do the reading together. He said, fine. So he said, take a couple of minutes. So he did. And he said, I'm looking at it and I'm trying as hard as I can to understand what's going on in the script. And he said, and eventually he comes up to me and says, are you ready? And I said, yes. And they both get up on this, he said, this tiny, tiny stage. And he said, okay, you start. It means you have the first line. And he started reading the first line like a third grader would, with, I then went to that thing. And the guy went ballistic, he said. He went crazy. He said, what are you doing here? You have no right to be here. He literally said, grabbed him by the nape of the neck and the seat of the pants and threw him out of the place. And as he threw him out, he said, go get a job as a dishwasher. And he slammed the door. So he's walking back down the street, looking for a way now to get home. And he stopped, he said, in the middle of the street, and he said, how did that man know I was a dishwasher? I said, there's no way that he would know I was a dishwasher. And then he said, that man thought I was a dishwasher because he thought I couldn't do anything else. And he said, at that moment, I decided that I was going to learn how to be an actor. And if that meant learning how to read, learning how to speak properly, I was going to do it because then I was going to go back to that guy and show him that I could indeed do that job. He said, and then after I finished, I did the acting, I'd go do something else because I never had the ambition necessarily to be an actor until later in life. But it's an extraordinary story. And he went back to dishwashing, and then he found at the American Negro Theater, they were doing auditions. And once again, he walks into the auditions and he said, I didn't even have a playbook, or I didn't understand that you were supposed to get something from the theater in order to recite or to interpret. He said, so what I did was I had a true crime magazine and I memorized as best I could, asking people what words were that I didn't understand so I could get a sense of what was going on. And he said, I memorized a couple of paragraphs and I went in and I used that for the audition. And so I auditioned, and then a couple of other people or a few other people auditioned, and then I got the letter that said they didn't take me. So I said, okay. But then he said, I need to learn. So he went back to them one day and he saw a woman who was a ticket taker, or she was working in the office. And he said, I auditioned the other day and they turned me down. But I really think that I would like to do this. And I noticed that you don't have a janitor. He said, I will be your janitor if you will teach me the theater. And she said, you do that? And he said, absolutely. So anyway, she said, I don't know, I'll check with the administration. And he left and he went back to his dishwashing jobs. And about 3 or 4 days went by and he never heard. So he walked back to the place and back in again and said, I was here 3 or 4 days ago. And she said, oh yes, of course, I'm sorry. And he said, I got the impression that she never asked anybody. She said, wait a minute. And she walked in and started talking to people that were inside the office. And a guy came out And the guy said, "You want to be our janitor to learn how to act?" And he said, "Yes." And he said, "You really want to do it that badly?" And he said, "Yes." So they took him in, and they took him in for about a year. And he was in all of these classes. I mean, this is the most extraordinary part of this. It wasn't as if, oh, I mean, you've been found, you're an overnight success. He went on for a year, and then they said, "Okay, well, you're never going to make it," and they let him go. And the people who were in his classes together, the people who, loved him apparently, because they went to the administration and they said, "Hey, this guy, he's a really nice guy. And, he spent a year here." They were doing a student production. He said, "He spent a year here. So he really should have the right to just give us a walk-on, give him one line or give him a walk-on." So they did. They gave him actually not just a walk-on in the student production. They gave him an understudy position to I think the lead in the show, because they figured, well, it's only one night anyway, and he'll never have to do it. But it turns out that the guy that actually was the understudy was Harry Belafonte. The actor was Harry Belafonte that he was understudy for. And Harry Belafonte, the night of the performance, couldn't go to the performance because his father was a janitor at a building downtown, a big building, and needed help getting ashes out of the coal furnaces. And it was the only night it could be done. And these big, heavy barrels of ashes had to be out. And so he literally, Harry Belafonte, couldn't do the show because he had to help his father. And as a result of that, he went on with it. And there happened to be somebody in the audience that saw him. He said, "I wasn't really that good." But there, somebody that saw him and then said, "Okay, I might have a part for you." And that's how we ended up getting an actual role that he could make money, a money-making role. In Lysistrata, I think, was the first thing that he did. And then from there, he managed to matriculate into the business. Amazing.
I thought it was interesting.
There's a man who had some real.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that one of his first movies was Blackboard Jungle.
Yeah.
And he played the leader of the gang of mostly white kids.
Right.
So that was pretty amusing at that time, that they would cast a black actor as the leader of this gang. And I wonder,
he never liked that role either. That's the weird thing.
Yeah, it was Rock Around the Clock was the theme song for that one.
He actually told his agent as a result of that movie that, he didn't want to be any movies like that. He thought the role was frankly beneath him, that it didn't showcase what he actually could do. So he wasn't really happy with that movie. And there weren't many movies that he wasn't that happy with, but that one in particular, he didn't like that role all that much.
Do you remember one he did with John Cassavetes where they were both, I think they were longshoremen, and they ended up getting involved with some bad guys working on the docks?
I do remember. I can't remember the name of that movie, but I certainly do remember that movie.
Yeah. That was one of his early ones too, that I liked. And of course, To Sir with Love was one of the classics that I remember.
Right.
And In the Heat of the Night, which you probably showed on the Movie Loft.
A number of times, in fact.
Yeah.
We showed Lilies of the Field, To Sir with Love. We showed In the Heat of the Night, and of course, there's an interesting story about that movie. He has an interesting story about that movie as well. He said that scene where he slaps the rich racist, in the orchid greenhouse. That scene that slapping scene was written so that guy slapped him and he just stood there. He wasn't supposed to slap him back again. And he said, "I won't take this role unless I slap him back again." Because, hey, I think it was 1967, 68, somewhere around there. He said, "Come on, this is ridiculous." And the director agreed and promised him, in fact, that not only would he change the script so that he slapped him back again, but that it would never be taken out of the movie, no matter where it went. So
we have a rare Sidney Poitier movie coming up on the Film Detective called Mark of the Hawk. One of his early ones, and we're actually restoring it, making it look better than it has in quite a while. That's going to be airing sometime soon. I do believe it's airing in February. And again, once it's restored, we'll be giving it sort of a big premiere.
Great.
Now, the other thing I remember about Sidney Poitier was nobody could pronounce his name. Everybody had their own way to pronounce his name. They would.
Yeah, he was very amused by that, actually.
Yeah, they struggled with
Poitier.
Poitier.
Yeah. He was very amused by that, and he didn't really care. To tell you the truth, he was one of those people who really didn't care.
Well, he
I
had
found
a lot
that
of
true of a lot of the people.
He was elegant. He was a very elegant character. Now, what was the movie that caused you to meet him? Was he promoting something in Boston and you had a chance to meet with him?
You know, as I said that, I was trying to think of the name of the movie, but no, it was a junket movie, in fact. And it was some time ago. It was a long time ago, because he didn't do a great many interviews later in life, I don't think. He didn't really have to. But for his later movies, I don't think he did a lot of junkets, certainly. But this was in the 70s sometime, I think. It was a long, long time ago. I just remember it being not a great movie, whenever it was.
Yeah, his heyday was the 60s. It seemed like everything he did in the 60s was perfect, you know.
Well, that's why everybody wanted to interview him, and that's why everybody was, all over him and asking him questions about the civil rights movement, as I mentioned before.
Right.
And he just wanted to talk about, acting and anything else other than that. But he was a charming man, a wonderful man.
Well, did he tell all of those stories to you, or were these
some
stories...
of them? Yes, some of them I just know from reading about him.
Yeah. He published a memoir that was very good. Big thick thing. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's a big book, and I've read chapters of it. Talking about when he came up to the United States for the first time, and some of his struggles. It was just an interesting character, like you said. It was not the typical journey from stage to film to, very, very unique.
Well, it's funny because he was actually born in America. I mean, he wasn't really born in the Bahamas. His father raised tomatoes. His father was a tomato farmer in the Bahamas, and this is hard to imagine, but he lived on a place called Cat Island in the Bahamas. There's hundreds of islands in the Bahamas, but it was some distance actually away from even Nassau. But his father used to take a sailboat across to Miami to sell during harvest time, to sell those tomatoes in Miami. And at one point, and his wife accompanied him, and at one point she was pregnant. And they got to Miami and she went into labor prematurely. And there's this whole story, it tells this whole story about how, his father said he's not going to make it. His father actually went to a funeral home and told him that, about the son, and the funeral home gave him a shoebox, and he went back, and his mother was adamant about the fact that, no, this boy is going to live, that, he's going to be okay. And his father, he said, was concerned that he would always be weak, that he was always be sick. And he said that was, turned out to be very far from the truth, of course. And his mother at one point, apparently during that period, during that couple of days, or would actually get up out of bed, she was looking for help from people because she had a hard time. She couldn't get in a hospital because, there just wasn't any hospital care at the time for them. And she went everywhere looking for people to help her with his birth, with the infant now, and who was premature. And eventually, she didn't get any help, really. And eventually, she wound up with this soothsayer of some kind. Apparently, used to love to tell a story about the fact she asked this this woman, what's going to happen to my son? And this woman said, your son is going to walk with kings. He's going to be rich and famous. That he's going to go to all four far corners of the earth. And she used to love to tell that story because all of it, of course, came true. But he was actually born in the United States. And then there's this whole thing about how there was an embargo on tomatoes, that you couldn't import tomatoes anymore. So his father's tomato business went down. And so he brought the family to Nassau, where he, struggled to find work in Nassau, and there were a lot of kids apparently in the family. So, I mean, you talk about adversity. It's unbelievable. The character that was built into this man. It's just extraordinary.
We also have a couple of birthdays coming up in February. A couple of actresses. Ida Lupino, February 4th.
Ida Lupino, yes, right.
And we'll be showing a couple of her films, The Bigamist, which was a great one, and one of my favorites that she directed, The Hitchhiker, which is a dirty little film noir that she directed, and with her own film company. She and her husband had created their own film company. Right. And they were producing some cutting edge stuff. What do you think of Ida Lupino? She was pretty interesting.
I think she was a beautiful woman. I mean, a gorgeous woman. And I know that she did a few roles later in her life, and she was still a beautiful woman well into her 50s and even into her 60s. And I know that she did a lot of directing, and said that it was something that she never actually thought she would do or had an ambition to do, but once she got into it, enjoyed it, apparently.
Oh yeah, and her movies were always hot topics. It was always, the controversial topics of the time. That's what she wanted to make movies about. She was, I hate to use the expression cutting edge, but that's what she was. She really liked the hot button issues. So we'll be showing a couple of her movies on February 4th. And on the 27th, Liz Taylor's birthday.
Oh, yeah, Liz Taylor. Boy.
Elizabeth
There's
Taylor.
somebody else who's quite a story, too, boy. Amazing story. Just incredible.
Well, it's funny. I remember when I was a kid, back in the days when you only had one television set in the house, and the whole family would gather around the television set, and what your father wanted to watch, that's what you watched. And because my father didn't like Liz Taylor, I didn't see a Liz Taylor movie till I was like 30. I had to grow up and leave the house before I could see a Liz Taylor movie. He couldn't stand the woman.
And what was his problem with Liz Taylor? Did he insist she was too promiscuous for him?
Well, I think it was because she was always in the news for divorces, or wasn't she married like 7 times? I think
8. I think she was married least, 8 times. Yeah. She married that construction guy. That was the last one, Larry. Larry begins with F. I can't remember his last name, but I think his first name was Larry.
Yeah,
and almost married. I think after that, almost married Michael Jackson's producer or his manager. I think she almost married him too.
Yeah, she couldn't.
But anyway, she did marry. Well, she married Burton twice. So
right.
She was only really married 7 times to different people, but she was married to Burton twice.
But yeah, every time I think of her, I just imagine my father recoiling at the thought of a Liz Taylor movie. But
a lot of those guys, a lot of the guys she was married to met their end really too young, before their time.
Well, there was the one who died in a plane crash.
There's Conrad Hilton, and then there was there were. I don't know. Yeah, she was something else, that's for sure. She had a play with Mickey Rooney too for a while, and they were together in National Velvet, I believe. Yeah.
Eventually, I saw her in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and then I got it, and I thought, yeah, she's great.
I
she's
couldn't get
wonderful.
enough of that movie. There was a point in my life I could not get enough of that movie.
Oh yeah,
The acting in that film was just mesmerizing. I
and it's
couldn't get enough
about
of that movie.
two and a half hours long,
Yeah, yeah.
and
But
every
it's
minute of
just,
it is worth watching.
oh God, George Siegel. Yeah, I mean, just
Yeah,
unbelievable. Yeah.
and the other Liz Taylor movie I liked was A Place in the Sun
Hmm.
with Montgomery Clift. I think that
Right.
was nearly perfect, for that period
But
in the movie
you
business.
can't really go wrong with Montgomery Clift. I mean, talking about somebody who went well before his time. But
Yeah,
um,
yeah, but
there's very
those
few
two
movies.
movies,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, what
Place in
about
the Sun.
Cleopatra? That's for
That
campy
that
fun.
one's a bit tough to sit through. That one's a bit long. That one feels long, whereas Virginia Woolf doesn't feel long. You know,
You
um,
talk about being in the news. I remember, when I was a kid, Cleopatra was in the news constantly, constantly, and it seemed like forever it was taking them to finish that movie. Remember,
oh yeah,
they were way over budget. They were, and then I don't know
yeah,
whether Taylor and Burton were, scooting off on vacation all the time.
causing the
I think
delays.
that's what didn't the Vatican for that movie. The Vatican actually, in some Vatican newspaper, wrote that they were erotic vagrants. I think they called them erotic vagrants, is what they did. And I thought, what a tremendous expression that is.
Wow,
And
I would
somebody
love to
wrote
be
a
called
book about them, erotic vagrants, I think. But that actually came from the Vatican. That was
and
really
they know.
that was an amazing time.
The
Yeah.
Vatican would know.
Yep, that's for sure.
Though the schedule is not set, we'll be showing some Liz Taylor movies on or around her birthday. We have a few of them. We have Father of the Bride, Father's Little Dividend,
I love those movies.
a couple of.
Yeah.
I know we have Father's Little
Yeah.
Dividend.
Generous woman, she gave a lot of money away, and of course for HIV, for AIDS, she gave a lot of money and a lot of her time later in her life, in fact, to that cause. So she was quite a woman. I mean, she was of her own mind. Let's put it that way. Very
Yeah,
independent.
and I think when she got tired of the movie biz, she was content. She didn't really do a lot of movies past a certain age. I think she was content to do her charity work, and
I think she stopped drinking, didn't she? And that was. I mean, I think she. Yeah. I mean, there was an awful lot of problems there. I mean,
yeah,
drinking and drugs.
and she was hawking perfume for a while too, wasn't she?
Yeah, that's
And
right.
diamonds or
Yeah.
lots of
I remember the Saturday Night Live mock-ups of that whole thing. Yeah. But yeah,
I remember
but she
Belushi.
was an extraordinary person. There's no question about it. And you don't get named the most beautiful woman in the world for, unless you really are the most beautiful woman in the world.
Yeah, it's a title she wore well for quite a few years. Now we also have Valentine's Day coming up. We'll be showing Love Affair. And
Which one?
I know, I'm not even sure. They have quite a few of them with that title, don't they? Let me check the skid.
Well, An Affair to Remember wasn't that a remake of Love Affair, if memory serves?
We're also showing a film called Happy Go Lovely and Charade.
Happy Go. Oh, Charade it's the best. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a Cary Grant movie. I watched a Cary Grant movie the other night, in fact. To Catch a Thief. I watched the other night.
Oh,
It's
sure.
fantastic. I've been watching a lot of the older movies lately.
Like what?
Well, I mean, movies like that, To Catch a Thief. Movies actually, I don't know, there's a bunch of, there's just too many to think of. But I watch a lot of older movies now.
Yeah, Charade is kind of fascinating because a lot of people thought it was a Hitchcock movie. They
Right.
still think it's a Hitchcock movie.
Well, it plays like a Hitchcock movie, really.
It was actually directed by Stanley Donen, who was more known for directing musicals and light romances. And then late in his career, he decided to do a Hitchcock movie. He did it so well, people still think it's a Hitchcock movie.
That's true. That's right.
Well, that's a full month of entertainment for the Film Detective. Dana, thank you for stopping by and chatting. I think we've covered the waterfront once again.
It's always a great pleasure, Don. And I can't wait till next time.
I will talk to you again soon. Adios.
All right, pal. Take it easy. Adios.